everybody. It's Monday, November 1st, and that means it's time for another episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, Nonprofit Conversations. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rose Tulip's Nonprofit Consulting and Association Management Services. Agnes Amos Coleman is on an extended leave, so she will not be joining us on this episode. But on her behalf, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience. And thanks everyone for joining us. This week, we're really excited to welcome back one of our favorite guests, Wendy Toyama. And welcome back, Wendy. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for welcoming me. I love chatting with you, and I'm excited about this topic. So I serve as the CEO for the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine. It's a client of the Association Management Center. I've been in association management for more than 25 years, and throughout my career, diversity has been a thread that I've really committed to starting back in my corporate days at Tribune. So I'm eager to dive into this topic with you.
That's great. And speaking of our topic, since we haven't mentioned it yet, it's diversity programs. And Wendy has, as she just mentioned, been working with diversity programs throughout most of her career and has had an interest in it. She's also served on the ASAE Diversity Committee. And Wendy, are you still on the Diversity Committee at ASAE?
I am not. I am a past chair. I'm currently serving on ASAE's research committee, which has given me an opportunity to intersect with diversity in a different way. And I've been enjoying that.
Oh, that's great. And the research committee does good work. So, well, we're here today to get your insights and your observations on diversity with your vast experience and access to now more information being on the research committee. So, in your opinion, what makes a diversity program within an organization successful?
Well, I think you just said one thing that makes it successful is the word program. I think there are organizations that think we can just kind of add this to everything we do. And that means that it's really not as effective because there's not any intentional focus. So I really think for the associations that are excelling in this area, they are allocating resources, both people, volunteer and staff, as well as financial resources to the effort. And it may be an embedded value, for example, for the organization. And I think that the way to really take your efforts to the next level is to be intentional and commit to investing in the ongoing work. It's not a one and done. We're not just going to release a statement after George Floyd was killed and form a committee and then be done, right? It takes that ongoing commitment and work.
Well, and I think I love that phrase one and done, because first of all, it rhymes, so it's easy to remember. But second of all, I think it really sums up what an approach in a lot of organizations is to dealing with things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or even ethics programs. As you know, over at the 501c League, I lead an ethics course as well. And one of the things we talk about is you have to have intentional action, not just intentional thought. And so the same thing applies, I think, to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what we've seen across the association profession over the last at least 10 years is a movement toward better understanding diversity and implementing it. And now that's expanding into equity and inclusion. And you have some experience in the healthcare area. And you had mentioned to me as we were prepping for this episode that you have seen some things in the healthcare area that you want to share with our audience about what you're seeing with diversity programs. So what are some of those thoughts about healthcare diversity?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to last May and just say that I was, shocked, angry, disappointed, and I wasn't necessarily optimistic that the outpouring that we saw would be sustained. I was skeptical. And so sitting here now more than a year later, I've been really encouraged because I have seen a sustained investment and commitment to this work. And I think specifically in the healthcare arena, I've spent my last 3 associations where I've been in the medical association space. We can't look away anymore from the health inequities that are out there. And associations are looking to see how can we help our members try to address that issue and beginning to look at systems and dismantling systems. And so I think one of the things that's a challenge is that in many medical associations, it's not a surprise that boards may not be diverse, right? And I think that these medical associations are being bold and being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and leaning in to figure out what they need to do. And that's key, because you can't let the fact that maybe you don't have the diversity you want now keep you from trying to figure out what you need to do. And I hear some people say, I'm afraid we're going to make a mistake. And I'm going to tell you, you will make a mistake.
That's right.
and we all do. We had something happen last year that we had to work through. And that is part of the journey, right? Part of the journey is demonstrating your commitment and then living your values, listening to your members, and working through those difficult things that will occur. We don't let being scared of holding a big meeting keep us from holding a big meeting necessarily. Of course, now in COVID, there's a whole different layer on that. But we figure it out, right? We lean in, we get experts to help us, and we figure it out. And I think that's the same thing here. We're seeing medical associations really invest in these programs, have tough conversations about their history, and address it, talk about it. So I've been really very encouraged by what I'm seeing happening around me, and hope that it will lead to addressing some of these really unequal outcomes we see with patients.
And I agree. I think that was a great overview and summary, because we had a lot of, I think, checkpoints is not quite the right word in 2020, but we had some startling points, I guess might be a better way to describe it. We had the George Floyd murder, which really exposed a lot of issues within our society. We had the pandemic lockdown, which, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, folks, created a different kind of underclass, because those of us with white collar jobs were allowed to stay home in our cozy little homes and have other people bring us things. And this is, people might think, middle-aged white women shouldn't be talking about diversity. And I think if we want to understand each other better, and we want to really reach all these levels that we say we want to reach. First of all, I want to come back to what you said, Wendy. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
It is not comfortable being the only person that looks like you when you're in a room of people. One of the things, and it's the closest I can relate to, many times I was the only woman in the room of men.
Sure.
And there's that. And that's the closest I can come. One time in my whole life, I was like the only white person at a party, one time. And you know what? I didn't even think about it at first. I was like, oh yeah, here's all these people. And then I start looking around the room and I'm like, oh, wow, I am the only white person in the room, And then I think about that and like, how does that feel for other people, who aren't white, who probably feel like they're not just uncomfortable, but they just maybe are wondering, are these people even going to talk to me? Do they understand how to talk to me? And I think that kind of brings us to the equity issue. Diversity and inclusion are two things we've talked about a lot. And we talk a lot about diversity of thought, not just diversity of what people look like. There's diversity of thought, there's diversity of experience, there's diversity of parts of the world that you're from. So there's so many different layers of diversity, and then making people feel welcome and included. Not just included, but welcome. And I think that's another word we overlook. But I would love to hear your views on equity, especially since you have touched on this important point of healthcare equity and making sure people are all having access to healthcare. So how do you see generally, are we getting closer to equity? Do we really know what that means? And then do you really see us making some progress in the healthcare area?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult question. And of course, this area of practice evolves, right? And so lately I was on a session. I'm involved with a large group doing some learning through what's called Equity Matters. It's a program that ACGME, CMSS, and OPTA are offering. And, we really were talking about moving not only beyond inclusion, but to belonging and how that's different, right? And so ideas around what we're doing in the DEI space continue to evolve, which I think is good. Are we closer to equity? I think that's really a tough question to answer. I think there's still a lot of discomfort talking about systemic racism. We're seeing the backlash with critical race theory training, and certainly the country's very divided. And I think what you were talking about with the pandemic, I think it created a larger economic divide, right? So I think we're closer in that we're talking about it. Does that mean the solution's going to happen tomorrow? I don't think so. I think it's going to take some time because we still get pushback when we do this work in associations, and that can be discouraging. But that is not new, and that's not going to go away, right? And so I think the idea that we're talking about what does equity mean, what does it look like, in our Equity Matters work, we're taking a trauma-informed lens to what we do. So the idea there is to acknowledge that some people experience trauma every day, microaggressions, and that there can be some good intentions that you do, perhaps asking someone to talk about their experience, and that can reactivate trauma, right? So just having a greater awareness. But it's hard because I think when people hear systemic racism, they take it very personally, right? And they're not necessarily looking at systems. So I think as we can elevate the discussion to better understand what's meant by that and what's meant by systems, and move it out of just the personal realm to what can we do with our organizations, our systems. And I think for association, that means we have to look at our legacy programs, things that may be barriers to creating greater access to leadership or membership, things that maybe we haven't mentioned. Why do we do it this way? And so I think all of those kinds of questions, conversations that are happening will help move us closer to being able to achieve equity.
Well, and I think just for the broader audience, could you share your definition of equity? Because I know a lot of people don't quite understand it, and sometimes they get it confused with equality, which is really more of a mathematical equation. So how would you explain equity to someone?
You're putting me on the spot. I really like the visual.
Okay.
I really like the visual that people have seen. So I'm just going to describe it. It's three people trying to look at a baseball game over a wooden fence. And they're all different heights. And of course, in this visual, they're different colors too. And so the first they show, only the tall person can see it. And then they all get boxes so they can all see. But that's not equity. Equity is when that fence is taken down and people can clearly see the game. So I really like that visual. That helps me kind of make the distinction between equality and equity. So I think equity, if you think about that and kind of extrapolate, means people being able to have access to opportunities that are similar across the board, and that there aren't barriers created just because of the way society is set up, right? That kind of favors one particular viewpoint. So yeah, I'm sure that our DEI practitioners out there have a ready definition right at hand, but I like the visual one. That helps me understand it.
I think that's really a great example too for the visual learners in our audience. So what is the closing thought you would like our audience to take away? And if they wanted to reach out to you and talk with you more about this topic, how could they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so, I'm just going to speak as an Asian American woman. And after George Floyd, I asked myself, what can I do?
Mhm.
at the individual level. And I decided what I could do is to use my voice more.
Mhm.
And so, what I would encourage people to do is to use their voice more. You might not be an Asian American woman, but there's probably something that you feel passionate about to speak out about. And I think it's important that we use our voices. So that would be my parting thought is, if we engage in dialogue with each other and use our voices, we will learn and grow. And our diversity person at the Academy likes to talk about bringing a culture of humility. And I like that. And so I like to come to this topic humble and with a learning mindset. So that would be my takeaway. It's a topic I love to talk about. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address is Toyama, Toyama, at aahpm.org. And I'm happy to connect.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Wendy, for joining us on this really important topic that I hope we all continue to work on. And I love your advice. Use your voice, speak up. Well, thank you once again, Wendy, for joining us. Look forward to having you back again to continue this conversation. We have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. If you want to learn more about Rogue Tulips, check us out online, roguetulips.com. And I encourage you to check out our sister company, the 501c League. You can learn more about them at the 501cleague.net. The League is a leader in CAE education and development and ethics training. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.